This is River Yamuna. It has always been central to Delhi's public policy. Preservation of its floodplains has been discussed in Delhi's master plan since 1962. Often referenced with London's Thames, Yamuna has featured in the imagination of Delhi as a world-class city. In the main city of Delhi, Yamuna flows over an area of 22 kilometers, spanning from Wazirabad to Okhla. Though this stretch covers merely 2% of the river's length, it accounts for 76% of its pollutants. This map shows the geographic expanse of River Yamuna and its floodplain along with its bottlenecks in national capital territory of Delhi. While in the upstream of the Wazirabad barrage, Yamuna has adequate floodplain area, it is severely bottlenecked at 5 locations in the main city. Out of these 5 locations, the flow of the river is particularly disturbed at Shastri Park and Yamuna Bank metro station, where the width of the floodplain is reduced to less than 1 kilometer. The presence of concrete infrastructure in these regions makes it flood prone.
Well, a flood alert has been issued in some parts of the Indian capital, New Delhi.
The Central Water Commission issued a severe flood warning for the Yamuna River in Delhi on August 12th.
Has exceeded the danger mark last evening after Haryana released water from its Hatnikund barrage.
The Delhi Master Plan of 2021 divided Delhi into 15 zonal areas and designated the entire floodplain area along the 22-kilometer stretch of Yamuna to Zone O. A report on the floodplains published on June 2, 2022 says that about 56 bastis comprising 9,350 households, roughly 46,750 people are living in Zone O. Most of the residents here are migrants from UP, Bihar, Haryana, Jharkhand and West Bengal. While about half the households practice farming, others rely on daily wage work, fishing, nurseries and animal herding. The report notes that this region supports a large variety of nature-based livelihoods with low ecological footprint, yet they are being evicted in the name of ecological rejuvenation.
The Commonwealth Village coming up near River Yamuna. India is spending 80,000 crore rupees to host the 2010 Games.
Delhi Master Plan 2041 further bifurcates Zone O into Zone O1 and O2, in which the latter includes structures like Akshardham Temple and Commonwealth Games Village.
But activists say the real cost of this plan, the environment.
यदि नदियां नहीं बचेंगी तो ये देश नहीं बचेगा, इस देश का स्वास्थ्य ठीक नहीं होगा. इस दिल्ली को पानी मिलता है इस फ्लड प्लेन से.
While no construction will be permitted in Zone O1, regularized construction will be allowed in Zone O2. It must be noted that both the Commonwealth Games Village and Akshardham Temple occupy more spaces along the floodplains and use far more groundwater, yet the Delhi Master Plan 2041 would allow for regularized construction at these sites. To sum it up, the Master Plan of Delhi 2041 rests on the exclusion of the marginalized. While the unauthorized colonies of the rich will be regularized, the poor will have to bear the brunt of bulldozers. The question then arises, how did the floodplains of Yamuna become the center of these settlements? Which of these settlements are to be declared illegal? Who occupies these illegal settlements? Where will they go after being evicted? And who stands to gain and who stands to lose in this process? The Yamuna River has a long-standing history in the capital. Mughal cities of Firozabad and Shahjahanabad were built on the banks of Yamuna. The city of New Delhi, built by the British, also exploited the vantage of this river. Delhi developed around it and it served as a source of water, and its floodplains became both a home and a means of livelihood. Agriculture on the riverbed was common, most notably the growing of melons during the dry summer months. Horticulture too was practiced on the floodplains of this river. There was some fishing too, especially at Okhla on the southern edge of the river. Settlements along the riverbed, particularly in the stretch of Yamuna Pushta, started after independence.
The very morning after independence celebrations, Hindus in Pakistan and Muslims in India began to flee their homes. Enormous convoys of people moving in opposite directions. The greatest mass migration in history.
In the aftermath of the partition, slums along the Yamuna Pushta have been home to refugees from western Punjab.
This flood of new arrivals overwhelmed the city as illegal housing settlements sprouted and grew all over. Today, the percentage of its residents living in these so-called unauthorized areas is as high as 40%. That's a staggering 12 million people.
To meet the growing demand for electricity, soon after, a thermal power plant was constructed here. The power plant required manual labor to operate, which led to an influx of migrant workers from UP, Rajasthan and Haryana.
An anti-government march.
During the emergency period, when the civil rights of the people were suppressed by then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, Delhi witnessed one of the largest eviction drives.
इमरजेंसी में जब जगमोहन के बुलडोजरों ने किया तुर्कमान गेट के घरों को ध्वस्त,
where over 18,000 jhuggis were removed and resettled in 16 colonies outside the city. According to the Shah Commission report, around 150,000 structures were demolished during the emergency period by various government agencies. This repression during the emergency received severe backlash, resulting in temporary suspension of such eviction drives. However, things were to change in the following decade. India hosted the Asian Games in 1982, which transformed both the infrastructure and image of the capital. Famous stadiums, auditoriums, and a number of the city's important roads and flyovers were built around this time. The government required cheap manual labor to build these structures, drawing in thousands of migrant workers from neighboring states. But where were these workers to be accommodated? While the workers built temporary shanties at the construction sites, no formal housing was available for these migrants. Prompted by their survival needs and livelihood that the capital offers, they remained in Delhi and eventually had to settle for cheap housing at the Yamuna Pushta slums. The failure of the state in accommodating migrant workers after having exploited their labor has escalated the problem of housing in the capital.
देखिए झुग्गियों में कोई शौक से नहीं रहता, झुग्गियां लोगों की मजबूरी है.
It was in the late 1990s when the process of eviction restarted on a massive scale.
The Indian people were being given shoddy goods and services at very high prices. Enterprise was stifled and growth was crippled.
The economic environment was simply not conducive to efficiency or profitability.
The government didn't just loosen the ties on multiple sectors within the country, but also opened the doors wide for a massive welcome to the rest of the world, marking the beginning of the great Indian growth story.
1991 marked the year of liberal market reforms that led to profound economic and social restructuring.
Markets were opened to the world, being made paramount not just for foreign companies.
The economy was transforming into a capital-intensive one, and Delhi was being redesigned as an emerging global capital.
But as urban India was breaking free, were there others being further shackled?
Prominent economist Thomas Piketty explains that in the 1990s, the share in total income of the top 10%, particularly the top 1%, rose sharply, while that of the middle 40% fell to historic lows.
The main reason is that market forces in themselves, are good to produce new wealth, but it will be a mistake to believe that these natural forces are enough to keep the distribution.
It was symbolic of the shift in the power dynamic between the poor and the rich. Remittances by NRIs and the flow of foreign funds caused an unprecedented real estate boom, resulting in the production of gated colonies and segregated spaces.
One of the first exclusive gated communities in Delhi, with over 70% of open landscape, terrace gardens, and taking the wonderful riverfront or temple view.
Manu Bhatnagar, Principal Director of Natural Heritage Division of Indian National Trust for Art and Culture Heritage, observes that in this period, the number of unauthorized colonies spiked in Delhi. And as the city had no proper sewage network to manage the population boom, the waste was dumped in Yamuna. Urban planning centered on the proposal to remake Delhi into a world-class city, but at the expense of whom?
किसी भी शहर में जब हम कोठियां प्लान करते हैं, बड़े-बड़े फ्लैट्स प्लान करते हैं, तो हम छोटे-छोटे घर प्लान नहीं करते। हम ये नहीं सोचते हैं कि एक अखबार बेचने वाला कहाँ रहेगा, रेहड़ी वाला कहाँ रहेगा, सब्जी बेचने वाला कहाँ रहेगा, कबाड़ी वाला कहाँ रहेगा।
What has this economic transition meant for the urban poor in Delhi? The 61st round of the NSS, a national level government survey of citizens in India, shows a fall in real wages for the lowest income group in Delhi and a decline in the state's provision of essential goods, including food items, healthcare, electricity and water. As the upper class became more resourceful and assertive, the economically weaker ones were losing their bargaining power. This shift in power dynamics between rich and the poor had its bearing on the judiciary as well. In slum eviction cases prior to the 90s, the courts not only acknowledged the failure of the state in urban planning, but also empathized with the slum dwellers and ensured that the proper care was taken in the resettlement process. However, post-90s, both the language and tone of the courts changed dramatically. The courts now not only exhibited indifference towards the slum residents, but went on to label them as encroachers. This apathy of the judiciary is reflected in the case of Yamuna Pushta slum dwellers as well, where the court turned a blind eye to the eviction and displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. On March 3, 2003, the Delhi High Court in the Wazirpur Bartan Nirmata Sangh versus Union of India case ordered the demolition of the Yamuna Pushta settlement. It is interesting to note that the petitioner had only asked for the removal of slums from industrial areas and had nothing to do with the Yamuna Pushta. But the High Court arbitrarily brought up the issue of Yamuna pollution, suggesting that the Pushta dwellers were the main contributors to the river's pollution.
This is the Wazirabad barrage. Basically, this is the same water. Okay, before the barrage and after the barrage.
Without verifying this or giving the residents the right to be heard, the High Court directed the concerned authorities to remove all jhuggis and structures on the Yamuna bed and its embankment within 2 months. Despite resistance from the local community for the following 8 months, the inevitability of the judgment took its toll. In December 2003, Mr. Jagmohan, who had earlier led a number of demolition drives in Delhi and came to be known as the Demolition Man, proposed a tourist hub for the area, and the court allowed the government to move forward with its plan. Intimidated by the presence of Mr. Jagmohan, the Delhi High Court's apathy and an imminent BJP re-election, the will of the people crumbled, and in March 2004, the eviction drive started. By the end of April, the entire Pushta, barring 2 clusters, Belagaon and Mulchand Basti, which had predominantly BJP supporters, were cleared.
In the guise of resettlement, encroachment, pollution and beautification of the city, in early 2004, in a matter of weeks,
about 150,000 people living in 40,000 homes were forcefully evicted.
40,000 homes were demolished without any rehabilitation plan.
After securing bits of economic stability, the Pushta residents had to yet again struggle from the scratch. Meanwhile, the vicious cycle of migration, homelessness, slum creation, forced eviction and displacement goes on in an endless loop. The displaced residents of Pushta were relocated to Bawana, Kolambi Kalan and Madanpur Khadar areas of the city, all of which are at the outskirts of the city. The state not only denied space to the urban poor, but further made no arrangements to ensure their accessibility to the main city. While men stayed behind to keep their jobs, women were rendered jobless. Moving forward to the year 2020, the National Greens Tribunal directed the DDA and South Delhi Municipal Corporation to remove illegal encroachment on the Yamuna floodplain in the Okhla region. Consequently, on September 24, 2020, the DDA bulldozers arrived at the Dhobi Ghat slums near Batla House's Khalilullah Masjid and bulldozed about 100 homes. Residents in the area complain that they were not given notice prior to the evacuation or reasonable settlement options henceforth.
और एक तो अचानक ही एकदम से आके तोड़ दिया, कुछ बताया भी नहीं, ना 2 दिन का मोहलत दिया, ना 1 दिन का मोहलत, साल से रह रहे और अभी जाए कहाँ?
However, should the residents of these slums alone be held responsible for polluting the Yamuna?
Is expected to inaugurate the festival on Friday. A massive stage spread over 7 acres is in its final stages, and the army has also been roped in.
In the year 2016, Shri Shri Ravi Shankar's Art of Living was found guilty of damaging the Yamuna floodplain by constructing the World Cultural Festival on it. And an expert panel later established by the NGT recommended a fine of rupees 42 crores for the floodplain's physical and ecological repair.
National Green Tribunal has pulled up the Art of Living Foundation. It's a scathing report which has been submitted by 7-member committee which is constituted by the tribunal. It has ruled that the Art of Living Foundation event has completely destroyed the ecosystem in Yamuna River floodplains.
However, the NGT had charged them merely 5 crore as compensation based on an earlier assessment. It was a classic case of pay and pollute. Manoj Mishra, convener of the Yamuna GA Abhiyan, notes that industries located on the banks of the river along with non-operational sewage treatment plants are primarily responsible for polluting the river.
It seems these fishermen are paddling through snow, but the foam resting on the murky black water is sewage.
Untreated domestic sewage accounts for approximately 80% of Yamuna's pollution load, with industrial pollutants accounting for the remaining 10 to 20%.
Just sewage that's pumped into the river every day. It's also a lot of industrial effluent.
In 2012, as per the NGT's orders, in the case of Manoj Mishra versus Union of India and others, an expert committee was formed and it warned against any construction on the floodplains. It noted that the area proposed for the Yamuna riverfront development plan is within the embankments of the river and is flooded frequently. Under the Yamuna riverfront development plan, DDA had proposed to develop the stretch of the Yamuna for recreational activities, public facilities and biodiversity parks. But despite the recommendations of the committee, the floodplains are being concretized with the construction of walkways and cycling tracks. These recreational areas are also open to commercial activities which will further affect the topography and pollute the river. Will the DDA bulldoze these structures as well? The trajectory of Yamuna forces us to introspect the linkages between environment and social justice. For decades now, the Yamuna and its floodplains have been home to communities that practiced agriculture and helped preserve biodiversity. Yet many of those displaced are the ones that belonged to these communities and were original inhabitants of this land in East Delhi. Now they remain at the mercy of DDA to claim their ownership on this land. As encroachers are evicted to beautify the riverbank, Yamuna remains as polluted as ever. Furthermore, the Delhi Master Plan 2041 in its attempt to save Yamuna will pave the way for gentrification. While polluting industries will continue to operate undisturbed and the Yamuna riverfront development plan will ensure access to the river to the elite, urban poor and marginalized with social and political capital will be left out.